In 1972, Title IX required federally funded colleges to investigate sexual misconduct. You might not have heard much about Title IX since, except when it's gone wrong. 48 years later, brand new sexual assault rules for colleges have just been imposed. When it comes to Title IX, what did the Obama rules do that you feel needed fixing?
At least 25 deaths have been linked to Takata airbag inflators. That's despite a giant recall that has been going on for years and cost millions of dollars.
You had a ticking time bomb in your car, and you took it in, and they replaced it with another ticking time bomb.
I knew I liked to speak my mind. I knew that my ideas did not comport with many other people in Hollywood.
And outspoken entertainer Adam Carolla. You have liberals and conservatives agreeing about the value of free speech and looking at some of the outrageous behavior that's happened.
I want your job to be taken from you.
But what kind of reception has that gotten?
It's been kind of predetermined by whichever side you're on.
Welcome to Full Measure. I'm Sharyl Attkisson. As this year's presidential election was fought out, some of the biggest hot-button topics had to do with culture wars involving college campus politics and sexual misconduct. Those two issues dovetail in our cover story about big sea changes happening right now at most American colleges, largely unseen and unreported. They have to do with new federal Title IX rules dictating how sexual assault claims must be handled. And while nearly everyone seems to agree the old policies fell short, there's a serious divide on the new approach. Today, we investigate the search for justice for all. When college campuses opened this fall, they were required to do it with brand new policies when it comes to investigating sexual misconduct and the rights of the accused. What was going on college campuses, in your view, that was in need of fixing?
The rules put in place oftentimes neglected appropriate due process measures to ensure the fundamental fairness of these disciplinary proceedings.
Tyler Coward is with the Foundation for Individual Rights in Education, a due process rights group, and supports the new changes. What happened in some cases that may have been improper?
One of the most prominent system for investigating allegations of sexual harassment and sexual assault was the so-called single investigator model. They served as judge, jury, and essentially executioner in some instances, where in our legal system, we don't task anybody with all those roles.
Title IX was originally passed in 1972. It requires federally funded colleges and universities to investigate sexual misconduct. 48 years later, advocates say sexual assault on campus remains common and often unreported, and the systems designed under Title IX broken. A survey of 33 large universities published last year found 1 in 4 women said they were sexually assaulted as students. Fewer than 1 in 3 said they filed a report or sought help from their schools. But there's also growing concern over fairness to the accused. The Obama administration issued broad guidance that lowered the standards to decide guilt in campus sexual misconduct cases. A flurry of lawsuits filed by young men claimed their rights were violated. One high-profile case came in 2014. Rolling Stone published A Rape on Campus about a fraternity gang rape and mishandled investigation at the University of Virginia. The story soon fell apart.
The article drew nationwide attention, but almost immediately collapsed under the weight of scrutiny.
The frat and a college administrator were awarded millions after Rolling Stone and writer Sabrina Erdely were found guilty of defamation. Sarah Colina is a gender justice activist and adjunct professor at Georgetown University. What is your understanding of how things stood before the most recent changes?
We had a problematic, confusing system that did not work very well. Since the regulations, we have a slightly more problematic, difficult system that doesn't work very well.
Colina criticizes a rule change that gives both parties, including the accused, the right to have a representative question the other side and examine the evidence.
Cross-examination is one of the issues that is required and is not negotiable. President Trump made it clear that he wanted to pass regulations that would make it harder for people to succeed in a Title IX complaint. And he's done that. That's exactly what all it does. It discourages people from coming forward. It makes it a little bit harder. It doesn't in any way help the process be more fair to anybody.
Why do you think so many academics and activists insist that the new rules are going to make it much harder for legitimate victims to have their cases fairly heard?
Well, I think that, I think it's just a false narrative.
Education Secretary Betsy DeVos ordered the Title IX changes in May.
2 years ago, I made a promise to address the scourge of sexual misconduct on our nation's campuses. Today, we take historic action on Title IX because we must.
When it comes to Title IX, if you could explain in simple terms, what did the Obama rules do that you feel needed fixing?
It resulted in an unjust approach that was in many cases, and I think accurately so, called kangaroo courts. We had dozens and dozens of court cases that found the school did not respect due process rights, the presumption of innocence, many cases that were overturned. And it was a massive overreach to advance a very left-wing agenda.
What is an example or a couple of bullet points of the rule changes that you think will fix that?
Well, first of all, we're very clear about the importance of respecting due process rights, the right to understand what the allegations are, the right to submit evidence, the right to read the evidence from the other party, the right to cross-examine, though not in person, not face-to-face, and the whole package of due process protections that are important, and then also the presumption of innocence, starting from a point where we don't immediately anticipate that the alleged perpetrator is guilty.
DeVos argues the Title IX rule changes also include sweeping new protections for victims and hold colleges accountable if they fail to protect students. The feds recently required reforms at schools faulted in several notorious cases.
Former Michigan State University and Team USA gymnastics doctor Larry Nassar has been arrested.
In September 2019, the Education Department fined Michigan State University $4.5 million. That after Professor Larry Nassar, an Olympic gymnastics team doctor, assaulted hundreds of women and girls over more than 20 years. He's now in prison. In February, a Title IX investigation uncovered lapses at the University of Southern California involving campus gynecologist George Tyndall. USC agreed to pay $215 million to former student patients who accused Tyndall of abuse or assault over 3 decades. And in March, the Education Department found Penn State University failed to protect students in the Jerry Sandusky scandal. He's the football coach now serving decades in prison for sexually abusing boys at an at-risk charity he started.
And this evening, Sandusky is behind bars after that resounding verdict on 45 of 48 counts guilty.
But Colina insists a main focus of the new Title IX rules, protecting rights of the accused, is misplaced.
If Secretary DeVos was really concerned about this issue, she would look at the problems that we have and see that false accusations, made-up accusations to maliciously corner someone, if you go to campus, that's not the problem we have.
Senior Katarina Watson acts as a peer mentor for a new student-designed course Colina now teaches at Georgetown, Title IX for a New Generation. If you could say what you hope people would leave this course with, what information or what takeaway, just in a sentence or two, what would you say that is?
I would say not only a general understanding of Title IX and consent and all the processes that come before and after that, but also like a hunger for spreading that knowledge and also building upon it.
Amid disagreement over Title IX changes, all are sorting through what the new policies mean in practice.
I'm not fighting to return to what we had. I mean, the truth is that what we had wasn't really working either. So we're asking students, and students are asking each other, what would it look like if we did it right?
This is a very fair and just process, and a suggestion that we should do something differently. I'd like to hear what they think should be done differently. Should we throw out due process? Should we presume that every individual that's alleged to be a perpetrator is guilty? I mean, what is their solution? There is none, because this is these are bedrock principles on which our country was founded.
Schools across the country are still tweaking their Title IX policies. Ahead on Full Measure, the ongoing danger of exploding airbags even after recalls and investigations. Next. As many as 30 million cars could still have a defective airbag despite a giant recall that's been going on for years. Lisa Fletcher talks to a former advisor to the Japanese company Takata that made the airbags. He's written a book about what he knows.
The massive explosion that leveled part of the Lebanese capital Beirut in early August showed the immense destructive power of ammonium nitrate, a highly explosive chemical that is also used in millions of vehicles. It's the power behind airbags that have saved countless people from serious injury, even death. But there's a problem with millions of them made by the Japanese company Takata. Lawyer Jerry Cox has spent years working on Capitol Hill, often involved in automotive safety legislation.
Takata decided that they wanted a bigger share of the market and that they could get that by making cheaper airbags. The way they did that was to switch to something called ammonium nitrate, which is a very cheap explosive.
That decision did save money and raise profits, but it was also disastrous. The chemical can degrade over time, especially when exposed to high heat and humidity, making it burn too fast and blow apart the metal canister designed to contain the explosion. When Takata's North American executives realized the scale of the problem, they hired Cox to work with them. He says he tried to convince company leaders in Japan that it was time to come clean.
And so they hired me to help try to persuade the owners of the company in Japan to be honest about it and to stop making airbags with ammonium nitrate in them and to recall and replace all the millions of units they had already put out in people's cars.
What was the reaction from Japanese executives when you suggested that they take an aggressive approach toward public safety and recall of the inflators?
The Japanese theory for any kind of a problem like this is if it stinks, keep a lid on it. And as 2014 went on, it became more and more apparent that, at least to the American executives, it became more and more apparent they were not going to be able to keep a lid on it.
And while executives in Japan fought to keep the problem secret, according to Cox, drivers in the United States continued to be injured and killed.
Way high, ready?
Drivers like Corey Burdick, whose 2001 Honda Civic stalled at an intersection and was hit at low speed by another car. The impact triggered the airbag and sent a 3-inch piece of metal into his skull.
It was like a millimeter away from my brain, so it definitely could have killed me.
Worldwide, at least 25 deaths and almost 300 injuries have been linked to Takata airbag inflators.
This is a partial list of the people who were killed.
Cox has now written a book about what he knows. In it, he describes how Takata got what he calls a sweetheart deal from the government at the time, allowing the company to replace defective inflators with new ones using the same chemicals, but with an added ingredient.
They are claiming that a desiccant, a drying agent that was added to those inflators, is going to keep them from blowing up.
We're talking about the replacement airbags. You had a bad Takata airbag, you took it and you got it replaced.
Well, it was like, you had a ticking time bomb in your car, and you took it in, and they replaced it with another ticking time bomb. But it was a newer ticking time bomb on the theory that it'll take longer for it to blow up and kill you. And I don't call that a fix.
One of the people who helped negotiate the deal on behalf of Takata was American lawyer Stephen Bradbury. In 2017, he was nominated by President Trump to serve in the Department of Transportation, and late last year, he became the acting Deputy Secretary of Transportation. So the attorney who did the deal for Takata is now the #2 at the Department of Transportation.
Right, that means that the person who negotiated the sweetheart deal is in charge of deciding whether to enforce even that deal or not. And so far, the answer has been not.
Bradbury declined to be interviewed for this story. In a statement, the National Highway Transportation Safety Administration says he has recused himself completely from any Takata-related matters. As for the newer Takata inflators that still contain ammonium nitrate, but with an added drying agent, the government earlier this year announced it wouldn't recall them, a decision Cox says was taken without consulting the engineers who designed the devices.
If you want to know whether those are safe or not, whether they're really any different from the ones that are now far enough along that they're clear and present danger to people, if you want to know whether those are safe or not, you should ask the people who designed them.
NHTSA says to date, it hasn't received a single report of a field incident associated with a desiccated inflator due to propellant degradation. It goes on to say, if these inflators show signs of degradation such that they present an unreasonable risk to public safety, NHTSA will not hesitate to act. Takata, the company at the center of this, filed for bankruptcy in 2017. The following year, it was sold and rebranded as Joyson Safety Systems. We're years down the road now with Takata. It triggered the largest recall in U.S. history. Why is it important to keep blowing the whistle now?
Because people will die. It's really simple. You're going to see, and there are official estimates, between 1,000 and 2,000. I think it's probably going to be more like 3,000 people who are going to get blasted by these things in the next few years. And that depends entirely on whether people take their cars in and get these repairs done.
For Full Measure, I'm Lisa Fletcher.
You can check if your own vehicle has a recalled airbag by going to NHTSA.gov/recalls. Coming up on Full Measure, entertainer Adam Carolla talks about the cancel culture and his documentary about it. Entertainer Adam Carolla frequently addresses today's cancel culture and the seemingly widespread chipping away at the First Amendment. His documentary, No Safe Spaces, examines this challenge to free speech on college campuses. I spoke with Carolla in Los Angeles about his latest book, I'm Your Emotional Support Animal, Navigating Our All-Woke, No-Joke Culture.
I just kind of try to figure out which way the wind is blowing, and then I write my books and my jokes and my commentary sort of based on things that either have happened, are happening, or going to happen. So you'll read stuff in the book, like it's in the book, which is we're going to cancel Uncle Ben and Aunt Jemima, except for that was written 6 months before they canceled Uncle Ben and Aunt Jemima. So if you kind of have your ear to the ground and your antennas facing true north, you'll start feeling and hearing things happening before they happen, and that's kind of that's what's in the book.
What is the value of knowing it if you can't, if you disagree with it, stop it or change the course of it?
I would say take something like diversifying your portfolio, and I'm not talking about your stocks and bonds, but I understood which way the wind was blowing in Hollywood over a decade ago, and the reason I make documentaries, and we're sitting in one of my warehouses where I do podcasting in the studios that I built. And like, I was watching Rachel Maddow the other day, and she started a show, she did 8 minutes about a typo that came out of the White House, that he said, You know, he didn't say Norway, he said Normay. And she just kept going, Normay doesn't even exist, and this, that, and the other. And I thought, there's plenty of stuff to get to, but this is a typo. Why so much time on the typo? But then I write books, and I travel, and I do stand-up, and I do. It's because I understood, I didn't know if there was going to be a place for me in a traditional Hollywood model doing a sitcom or whatever format. I knew I liked to speak my mind. I knew that my ideas did not comport with many other people in Hollywood's, and I suspected I'd be unable to earn a living if we got to where this is going, which is where we are now. So, but you can't cancel culture me. I own the building, and you can't, you know, you can try, but I make the docs, I write the books, I make the films. I live outside of the Hollywood world, and that was intentional.
You have the right to remain silent.
Looking at no safe spaces, you have liberals and conservatives agreeing about the value of free speech and looking at some of the outrageous behavior that's happened. But what kind of reception has that gotten, and what's your response to that?
Well, I think the people who went into it with a preconceived notion of not wanting to like it, those people have sort of made it into a self-fulfilling prophecy where I told you it was, you know, right-wing propaganda or whatever it was.
There's no free speech for fascists.
I think anyone who watched it, who entered from a neutral kind of balance, open posture, which is, oh, what is this? I would like to consume it. They probably walked away with a completely different point of view or opinion. So, like many things in our society, it's been kind of predetermined by whichever side you're on to either embrace it or reject it before it's been sampled, which is not what we're looking for, I think, as a society, but it's definitely where we're at.
Carolla's No Safe Spaces is out now and features comedian Tim Allen and former Obama advisor Van Jones, among others. And we'll be right back with a look at what's ahead next week on Full Measure. Coming up next week on Full Measure, nearing the end of our 6th season, a special wrap-up where we highlight some of our most significant investigations, as well as your favorite stories and ours too. We'll showcase some of these interesting reports with guest appearances by Scott Thunman and Lisa Fletcher. Now there are several ways to watch Full Measure from home or on the go. To watch full episodes, download the Stir app on your phone or on your Roku, Apple TV, or Fire. And if you want to hear more about our stories, check out our podcast, Full Measure After Hours, on your favorite distributor. Until then, we'll be searching for more stories that hold powers accountable.